now recording.
Don't mind us.
Okay.
You can have right back.
Evan, Jenna and Devin from Evolution Physical Therapy. There you go. Take it away.
All right. Thanks for joining us this evening. If you guys are willing and able, if you want to try some of these kind of movements and you have space around you, please feel free to do so while we're here tonight. If you want to turn your cameras on, we'd love to help you kind of answer some specific questions. And like David said, you can either put them in the chat box or go ahead and kind of, as we move through these things, raise your hand or try and flag us down in between. We're happy to answer those questions. So what we have planned is to go through a skills checklist, and it's something that we've kind of deemed to be some essential strengths and movements for runners. Devin here is our doctor of physical therapy, so he's going to be the expert in that. But for me personally, as a runner, it's something that's been really helpful in, kind of learning how to be a strong person that then translate into being a strong runner with some of these kind of little things that I should be doing to complement my training.
Yeah, so in this little runner's checklist that we're going to go through is it's a series of tests that we do every day in the clinic with our patients as well, just to give us a kind of a baseline of how they're moving. And they vary from some mobility type tests to some strength and motor control or stability type of tests for people. So, but they all are kind of areas that as physical therapists that we deem very important that runners are proficient in if they want to both perform well and reduce the likelihood of missing time due to injury. So without further ado, we will get started with going through our checklist here. So do you want to introduce the toe yoga?
Yes, so we're going to go through 6 skills. To start with, the first skill we're going to do is toe yoga. This one sounds kind of silly, but it actually is very, very important. Toe yoga is something that, tests our foot intrinsics to see how well, as a runner, we're able to kind of control and manipulate some of those smaller muscles in our foot, as that is kind of the base of our standing, walking, running. So I am going to have Devin show you this in just a moment, but think of kind of your thumb and your 4 toes as the different parts that we're going to be working with here. So we want to make sure that we're able to control, and we do this through separating by standing flat foot, lifting up our big toe, bringing the big toe down, lifting up the 4 toes, bringing them down, and going back and forth. So then Devin and I will show you that right now. So it's going to be a little bit hard to see his feet, but he's going to stand flat-footed, kind of just right underneath his hips, and then pick up his big toe, and then bring it back down, and then do the 4 toes, bringing it back down. So he has actually really good control in his feet right now.
Oh, you may want to move your monitor down a little bit so we can see. Just tilt. There we go.
Perfect, thank you.
Sure.
So Devin's just going back and forth with his, working on his foot intrinsic, separating the big toe and the 4 little toes.
So there's a few common faults here, guys, that I see every day when testing people on this. So people usually get this one down pretty good, but one common mistake when they're doing just the big toe up is they'll tend to roll out to the side and the ball of their foot will come off the ground. So with these movements, you shouldn't have any motion happening at your ankle. So I shouldn't see the ball of the foot coming off the ground this way. So make sure that's in contact with the ground the whole time. The other common mistake is when that big toe comes down and they lift the lateral 4 toes, they'll tend to roll their foot in like this. So you'll see kind of the ankles come closer together. That's another mistake. So those are 2 signs of not having good control of those foot intrinsic muscles. So make sure ankles are not wobbling in or out while you do it, and you should maintain an arch throughout that motion. Couple things in that where it, this is testing a few different things. So your big toe is the most important part of your foot when it comes to running. And we're making sure that you have enough toe extension. So you need at least 30 degrees of big toe extension for you to run without compensation. So just seeing, so if you picture if your big toe went straight up and down, that'd be 90 degrees. So about, if you can get about 1/3 of the way there, then you have enough big toe range of motion. The other thing is, you know, when Jenna was mentioning those foot intrinsic muscles, think of those as being like your core muscles of your foot. And if those aren't working, then your feet are going to be really sloppy, and that's going to mess up when it comes down to your striking the ground and pushing off throughout your gait. So, you know, it's a pretty basic test to do, but it's really, really important. And it tends to lead to compensations up the pad or up the chain into your ankle, your knee, your hips. And can lead to a lot of other injuries such as like plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendon issues, and even things all the way up at your hips if your feet aren't functioning well.
All right, unless there's any immediate questions on toe yoga, we'll go ahead and go to the next skill, but please feel free if questions do come up or you're trying this as we're chatting, put some questions in the chat box and we'll go ahead and answer them for you. The next skill that we are going to go through is our knee to wall test. And so this test is really looking at your ankle dorsiflexion. And ankle dorsiflexion is essential to your like running gait cycle. If you have poor dorsiflexion in your ankle, it's going to be harder for you to maximize and perform with that energy return in your running cycle. So Devin is also going to demonstrate this one for us. You're gonna need a wall, but we are gonna use a foam roller. So really anything that you can kind of get in front of you. And as this is going on, let me see, we'll go down. So if this is your wall, Devin's gonna stand in a lunging position with his toes to the wall, and then he's going to lunge forward, and his knee is gonna touch this foam roller or your wall. And the goal is to not have your heel leave the ground here. So he shows great range of his ankle dorsiflexion.
So the other key with that one, as you're lunging forward with your foot there, is making sure that your arch is not collapsing there as well, because people can you know, compensate through some excessive motion at their foot. So if you're collapsing your arch and your knee is tracking inwards of your second toe, then that'll make it look like you have more range of motion than you actually do in your ankle. But that one's pretty straightforward and should be easy for you guys to test out at home. So the next test we're going to get into, unless you guys have any questions there, and at the end of this, we're going to actually go through some exercises and things that can correct some of these, but feel free throughout here, guys, to, if you have any questions, you can also like type something in the chat box too. We're keeping an eye on that. So if you want to type in any questions, we're happy to answer there. So we're going to go over the lateral step down test next. So this is testing several things. So, and you'll notice each of these tests are probably going to get a little bit more progressive as we go. So the lateral step down test is going to be testing a combination of some ankle range of motion, some foot and ankle stability, as well as some stability up at your hip and your trunk. So you're going to find a step somewhere around kind of 8 to 10 inches high. And what we're going to be doing is kind of lowering down and trying to tap our foot to the ground and come back up without any compensations here. So probably best to demonstrate, and I can kind of walk you guys through it as Jenna is demonstrating this exercise here.
And bear with me, Devin might be correcting me as I do this exercise. These are tough.
So Jenna's going to stand on her step. Turn her face me, actually, Jenna. That'll be best. Yeah. And then, yeah. So she's going to stand on the step over towards the one side of it. And she's going to put her hands on her hips. Good. And now she's going to lower straight down and tap her heel to the ground and come back up. Now, going straight down is important here. A lot of times people will kind of really shift their way backwards to try to unload their knee a little bit, which looks like Jenna's doing a little bit there, but not bad.
A little bit back.
That's pretty good. So try to keep that knee straight on that side. Good. There you go. Good. Nice. And so depending on the step size you have, if your step is a little tall, some ankle range of motion might get in the way here. and make it challenging. So a few things that we're looking at as she does this test is we want to make sure her knee is not tracking inside of her foot. So it should be right in line with the center of your foot. So we use the second toe as a barometer of that. So kind of the center of her kneecap should be right over the center of her second toe. So from here, straight down to there. Good. The other thing is we want to make sure her hips are staying level. So I'll kind of show you what I mean there. So where her hands are, we want these to stay level the entire time. So what you'll see sometimes is someone's hip is going to kind of dip down with that. And associated with that hip drop, you'll usually see their knee collapse inwards as well. You good?
What else?
And then the other thing is making sure, so we want your hands to stay on your hips and also your trunk. So the center of your chest should stay right in alignment over the center of your pelvis. So we want to see a nice straight line through here. Good. Jenna's getting a little fatigued just doing that test, so I'm going to let her take a break there. But it's a tough one, and it's a good one to practice. That gives you a lot of information about how you're moving, both from a stability and a range of motion standpoint. Next test we're going to do is a side plank with a hip abduction test. So this is really testing your lateral hip muscles. So particularly your gluteus medius is the big one here, which plays a really important role with stabilizing your hip, which can help both hip issues as well as knee and foot and ankle issues. So, they've seen correlation with gluteus medius weakness with types of injuries all the way down to the foot and ankle, all the way up to their hip. So another really important one, and this is also a very challenging one. So basically, Jenna's going to get into a side plank position, and we're going to try to raise the top leg. And the goal is to be able to hold it for 30 seconds. So we're going to give it a go. And I'll show you, so there's a modification for this too, because this is pretty challenging to do the full test for a lot of people. So Jenna's going to show you first the full test here. So she's in a side plank, and then she's going to raise that leg up and hold. So we're trying to make sure her hips are staying stacked and she's not rolling in or out. And she's trying to keep that leg as high as she can there. She's actually doing really good. She's been working on these since the last time we did this. Good. Now, if that is too challenging, a kind of a workaround to kind of build up to that is to do it with her bottom leg bent. So, yeah. She's going to have this knee bent here. Top leg is still going to be straight, and she's going to hold there. We're trying to make sure, too, that her pelvis stays level, so I don't want her to rock too far this way or too far that way. I also don't want you to arch your back too much. So try to bring your rib cage down here a little bit so that you feel your abs firing. So I felt her abs turn on as soon as I cued that rib cage there. So it's also a little bit of a core exercise and core test there too, where you're testing out those kind of lateral core muscles, anterior core muscles, as well as those hip stabilizers. So really important one to be working in. That can be both a test and an exercise, as you'll see with some of these that we're doing here. Can be the correction can also be the same as the test there. Cool. Single leg heel raise.
Yeah. All right. So the next test we are going to walk through is the single leg heel raise. This one is really just going to test your calf strength here, and as with each stride, the force you put on your lower leg is going to be about 7 times your body weight. So this one's really important that we ensure that there's enough strength in your lower leg to support your body while you're running. And this one has different standards on kind of what you should be able to do depending on your age and as well as if you're male or female. And so we'll send out our blog, and it has a full chart. So for someone my age, it'd be about 30, but it kind of varies. So we'll have Devin demonstrate this one. So he's going to stand on a step. Again, you can use a similar step to what you did for the lateral step down. And he's going to be on one foot, rise up with his calf, and then go down. And he is going lower than the step, is that correct?
Yeah, so heel should come down just below the step.
So heel should be just below the step. And then depending on your age and if you're male or female, you want to be able to hit the gender standard. So it's 30 or around there.
Yeah, so a couple things with that too. So cadence of the heel raise is really important. It should be slow and steady, straight up and straight down. Think about a 30 beat per minute cadence. So if you're doing 30 heel raises, that should take a full minute to complete them. If you're going too fast and bouncing, then it's not going to be a true test of where that strength is at. And as Jenna said, there's a chart in the blog post that we're going to send out to everybody that has your age norms. One thing to keep in mind with that chart. So for me, I'm 33. I know the males 30 to 35, or it might be 30 to 39, was 32 heel raises you have to do. Now keep in mind that those are just for normal humans. So that wasn't taking a sample size of runners. So as Jenna had mentioned, that runners are, you go through forces up to 7 times your body weight through your calf while you're running. So someone who does not run, 32 might be okay. For people who are running, that is like the bare minimum of where you should be. And you really want to try to strive for being able to do more than that. So building in some calf strengthening into your programs is something that I'm a huge advocate for, especially for aging runners, because that's one of the first things that we see drop off is that calf strength. And then that can lead to Achilles issues down the road. So we don't want that happening. All right. So we got one more test here, and then we're going to go through some corrective exercises for each of those. So the last test is the single leg bridge test. So Jenna's going to demonstrate that for us. So here we're testing a few different things. So we're testing some more glute strength, but more from a hip extension standpoint. We're also testing a little bit of core stability, a little rotary stability, because she's going to be holding on one leg. So her core and her hips have to stabilize that rotational force.
My feet in the right space.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, so she's going to be laying on her back with her knees bent. Her feet are pretty good at it. They don't need to be pulled all the way into your butt, but they shouldn't be too far out. And she is going to bridge up. And then she's going to extend one leg out in front of her. And the goal is to be able to hold that for 30 seconds. We want our hips to stay level. So the tendency a lot of the times is for the hips to drop like that. We want them to stay here. And there's a question I want you all to ask yourself while doing this. Do you feel it most in your lower back, your butt, or your hamstring? If the answer is anything but your butt, then we've got some work to do. So you should be able to hold it for 30 seconds with feeling mostly in your glutes. We don't want the hamstrings taking over. We don't want the lower back taking over. And you should be able to hold that without losing height and without your hips dropping. So it's really important. Hip extension is one of the most important parts of the gait cycle while you're running. That's where we want to get a lot of our power from as we are pushing off. A lot of people run into issues with overstriding while they're running. One of the big ways to avoid overstriding is to improve your hip extension. If you're not able to extend the hip well enough, then you're much more likely to overstride and reach forward, and that leads to a whole other set of issues there. So hold 30 seconds, no drop in hip height. Keep the pelvis level. So kind of like if you had a level sitting there on your waist, we want that to stay nice and even the whole time. And then we want you to feel mostly your butt, not so much your back or your hamstring. Cool. Any questions so far, guys? So those were the 6 tests that we're going to go through. Now we're going to run through some correctives for each of these exercises here. So we'll jump back up to the start with the toe yoga. So if I have people where they're having a difficult time being able to do the toe yoga test, first thing I'll have them do is lift all 5 toes up. And then I want them to keep all 5 toes up and see if you can just tap your toe down. Sometimes that can be easier than just doing the lift the lateral forward, lifting the single toe there. I also use the cue when you're trying to lift the lateral foretoes. So first you lift the big toe up, bring that big toe down. Now pretend like you're trying to crush a penny into the ground with your big toe. And keep that tension there as you try to lift those lateral foretoes up. A lot of times people are a little bit too passive with that big toe. Big toe is incredibly important for, for walking and running in general. So you want to make sure you have good stability of that big toe. So as you bring that big toe down, press the big toe into the ground, lift those lateral foretoes. And then sometimes I'll even come right in and put my finger underneath and tell someone, squish my finger. And I want to make sure I can feel that. So at home, you can stick a penny under there, or some sort of coin or anything that you want to press your big toe into, and squish that into the ground and lift those lateral foretoes up. So if you're having trouble with that, start with the lift all 5 up and tap the toe to the ground, and then try the crush your penny and then lift the lateral foretoes up. The other thing is just sitting there and trying it and focusing on it. So a lot of times this is just a matter of needing to kind of like turn the light switch on for those muscles, because most of us have worn, kind of cushiony shoes our entire life, not brought enough attention to the muscles of our feet. So those muscles have just turned off. So sometimes it's just a matter of sitting there and, focusing on it for 5 minutes, maybe even longer. I've had plenty of patients who have sworn to me on the first day I saw them that I can never do that. It's so frustrating. And they actually get pretty angry when they can't do it. And then I just tell them, focus on it for a week. I guarantee you'll come back and be able to do it. And I've never met anyone who hasn't been able to figure it out. It's just a matter of kind of putting your brain power to it. So it's just one of those things. For the knee to the wall test, not too many people really end up having too much ankle dorsiflexion loss. There's a couple of things that we can do for it. People do lose dorsiflexion, but the amount needed for running isn't as high as people think. So a lot of times people actually really overstretch their calves more than they really need to. Whereas we mentioned later on, strengthening your calf is probably actually the more important thing. But if people did fail that test, the 2 things I look at are, 1, did you feel it in the front of your ankle, or did you feel it in the back of your ankle? So if you failed that test and you felt it in the front of your ankle, it's telling me that there's actually a joint mobility restriction. And that's something that probably needs some more manual therapy from a physical therapist or another form of manual therapist. If you felt it on the back side, favorite thing to do is go to some foam rolling. So I'll have Jenna come over here and grab a foam roller. And in general, if you're having, like calf soreness, I'd rather most people try to start with foam rolling their calf than really stretching it a lot. Like I said, I think some people probably do too much stretching of their calf, and what they actually need is some more strengthening there. But if you are just feeling a lot of tightness in that calf area, foam rolling is the best place to start. So I'll have Jenna cross her left leg over the right. On it or over down here. There you go. Good. And the main thing when you're to foam roll properly here is, as you're working through your calf, seek out the tender spots in your calf there. And when you find a tender spot, I want you to sit right on it and stay there. And then what Jenna's going to do is do some ankle pumps as she's sitting on that tender spot. You can do some ankle pumps, some ankle circles. So doing that type of tack and floss technique. So most people I see just kind of go back and forth on the roller. That's not nearly as effective as doing this technique here, where you're going to kind of seek out those tender spots in the muscle, sit right on it, pin that tissue down that's tight, and then start getting it moving. And you can really apply that to any of your foam rolling at other parts of your body. Cool. All right, so some of these next couple exercises where some of the correctives get a little bit more fun. So for our lateral step down, I'm going to show you an exercise I call a lateral toe tap, which is really going to get your butt burning. So if you guys have a band at home, it would be great to pull that out right now. And I'll show you one exercise after that doesn't need a band. So this one is a really good lateral hip stabilizer here. So if I'm going to work my right leg, I'm going to put all my weight onto this right side. My left foot, I'm going to have my toe kind of level with my heel. I'm going to have my hands on my hips. I'm just going to reach out to the side and tap my toe to the ground and then tap back by the heel. The goal here is keeping my right knee straight above my ankle. Okay, so like we talked about with that lateral step down, we don't want to see the knee coming in this way. So your focus is keeping your knee straight ahead, creating good alignment between your foot and your knee. So your center of your knee should be right above your second toe. And you're just going to tap out to the side and back here. So a couple compensations that we see here are sometimes trunk tipping to the side to do it, or like I said, knee collapsing in. So don't let this knee collapse in here. Hold right to the side. Good. I'm going to put a question in there too. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to give you guys a exercise without a band that's going to help with that lateral step down. So this exercise I call clock squats. So for the clock squat, it's going to be a little bit of single leg balance and a little bit of knee control here. So I'm going to start, so if I'm doing it for my right leg, I'm going to do kind of a mini single leg squat and tap my foot out in front of me, come up to a balance point. I'm going to tap straight out to the side at 9 o'clock, come up to a balance, tap at 6 o'clock, and then 3 o'clock. So each time you're doing this, you're doing kind of a mini single leg squat where I'm working on controlling my knee and keeping it straight above my ankle. This is a great one that doesn't require any equipment. It's really going to get your quad and your glute burning. So what you don't want to see is as I step out here, I don't want to see this knee collapsing inwards. Similar as I step forward, make sure the knee stays balanced over the second toe. Don't let that collapse in here. And that's kind of your focus throughout, is centered above the ankle. Don't allow that knee collapse. Cool. All right, so we had the side plank with hip abduction. So as we mentioned with that one, the corrective to me is doing that bent knee form of it. So you want to demonstrate that bent knee one again?
Yes.
So if you have a hard time doing the full side plank with that leg raise, you're going to go right in and do the bent knee. Good. And you're just going to work on building up time with that one. So that's one of those where the test is the corrective. So give that a go and just work on increasing your time to be able to hold there. And then when you feel good, then you're going to try to go that full straight leg one. Somebody have a question?
I just need to put it after we do.
Cool. All right. Next test is single leg heel raise. I'll show you guys my favorite corrective exercise here. So obviously with a heel raise, you can just do heel raises, and that is a good way to strengthen your calf. I prefer this technique called the front foot elevated heel raise for a couple reasons. It's going to put my back leg into a little bit more hip extension, which is a little bit more running specific to your gait. And it's also easy to load up. If you have weights at home, you can start carrying weights. You know, whereas doing just a regular single leg heel raise is kind of hard to hold on to weights unless you have like a weighted vest or something. So that front foot elevated heel raise, I'm going to put my front foot on my step. Now, if I'm doing it without weight, I like to go with my hands above my head. So focus on good posture and keeping that chest up. And then just think of that 30 beats per minute metronome. So as I mentioned, this is going to put my hip into more extension by putting this leg up on the step. It puts my back leg into hip extension, which is really where you get that toe off while you're running. So it becomes a little bit more running specific. And I think a really good way to train your calf and Achilles. Now, what I like to do then is add weights to it. So if you have dumbbells, kettlebells, a cinder block, whatever you got laying around at home, you know, the bucket, you're going to hold them in your hands, and it really allows you to load this exercise up. The key here is make sure you're not shifting your weight onto your front leg. So my front leg is really just serving as a kickstand. So I shouldn't really be loading this front leg. There's almost no weight through this leg right here. All my weight is on my back leg. So loading through the back leg, slow, controlled. Think of that 30 beats per minute, no bouncing.
Last one, glute bridge.
Cool. The glute bridge is another one that, you know, is that the test can be the exercise, but there's a couple of correctives you can do to get to it. So Jen, if you want to get on the ground here. So if you're having a hard time just getting to that single leg spot, what Jenna's going to do is go into a double leg bridge first. She's going to hold that position. Now she's just going to do a little bit of a march. So lift up the one leg and bring it back down and lift the other. So you're going through brief periods of holding that single leg position. And then what you'll do is you'll build up to being able to hold extended periods of time. So she might start by doing that march for 30 seconds. And then what she might do is go with a 5-second hold, a 10-second hold, and start building up to where you can do a 30-second hold with good technique and with activating the right muscles. So like we said, we want you to mainly focus on feeling your glute there. So along with testing your strength, you're also testing your preferred way of firing those muscles. And that's why we really focus in on getting you to feel your butt muscles working, not your hamstring, not your lower back, because those are signs of some compensation patterns happening. So sometimes with that, you just need to really like focus, okay, squeeze my butt, drive my foot through the ground, and really kind of get some feed forward thoughts into the glutes there.
I have a question for you on all of these.
Cool.
So I should be doing them on each side, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And is there a cause of concern if one side is significantly different? Say I can do the single leg heel raises fine on one side, but can't do it on the other side. Like,
yes. So,
what should I be concerned about or thinking about?
So that's a great question. Asymmetry is definitely a big thing we're looking for in this. So thank you for that question, because I probably should have mentioned that earlier. Is not only passing the test is important, but looking at symmetry side to side is important. So if you have one side that's drastically different than the other, then that should definitely be some not necessarily red flags going up, but some caution flags in your head of saying I really need to do some work here. And that might mean you do double the repetitions on the side that is much weaker than the other. I still think it's good to work both. So say the heel raise, you're very weak on your left and your right is good. You should still work the right side, but maybe do an extra set on the left compared to your right, and help that left leg catch up to the right side. But I definitely always work both. And then sometimes, just on that asymmetric side, we want to add a little bit more in. But definitely having asymmetries like that can definitely be something that throws off the running gait, and something that you won't even notice while you're watching someone run, but neuromuscularly things can be happening different inside, and putting loads on different tissues that you wouldn't know until it becomes a problem. And that's part of having this checklist, is we go through these and we're testing all these different areas that are supposed to be functioning well while you're running, and that are supposed to be absorbing load while you're running. That way you can identify these before they become, a pain or an injury spot.
And then we had a question come in, and it was when we were foam rolling, and you were telling me to get the most out of my foam roll by like pumping my ankle. Mm-hmm. The question was, is there strategies for that, for like rolling at your hamstring? Yeah,
so the kind of tack and floss technique can become a little bit more challenging for the hamstring. So obviously, as I'm doing this, there's not really a lot of room for me to kind of tack and floss with that. But with the hamstring, one way you can kind of work into that is when you get a tender spot, you can do a little bit of like side to side, just kind of rotating my leg through there. So as I find like, okay, here's a little tender spot on my hamstring, I'm going to pin that down where it is. And then I can just kind of shift my way in and back out. Another popular way of doing it is if you have a lacrosse ball and you could sit on a firm surface. I don't have something high enough here to sit on, but I could sit on something with the lacrosse ball in my hamstring here. So on the table, bench, something along those lines, and then you can extend your leg and bring it back down. So that's one way of doing that with for the hamstring.
So do we have any questions on some of these, either the skills checklist or maybe some of these corrective exercises? Anything you want us to go into more detail on?
How many of you are watching the Lakers game right now instead of paying attention to this? Don't worry, the first quarter doesn't matter in NBA games. It's all about the second half.
You know, I have a quickie question.
Yeah.
When you're doing those hip raises and your leg is extended outward, if you don't just feel it in your glutes, if you feel it a little bit in your hamstrings and maybe a little bit in your lower back, what does that mean? What do you need to do to compensate?
For the single leg bridge test you're talking about there?
Exactly, yeah.
So that's a little bit of a test of neuromuscularly what's happening. So think of that like, kind of the wiring in your house. So it just tells me that your current motor plan, meaning how your brain and muscles are interacting, is telling your hamstrings and your lower back to do a little bit more to help create that extension out of your hip. So, to give you an example, one really like just to kind of dramatize it, how it might impact your gait. So if someone is biased to where they don't use good hip extension, and so this is the hip extension here, as I push forward through here in my gait, what we see a lot of the time is they'll get this little rib cage flare in the front, and they'll use a lot more lumbar extension to kind of push themselves forward with their gait. So you can see a lot of low back pain there. And that was obviously exaggerating quite a bit with it. But it can be much more subtle while you're running, where you don't necessarily have that good kind of forward trunk lean, and you're not getting this push off here. Similar with the hamstrings. And so there can be a lot of reasons why that's happening. Like say if your hamstrings are taking over, sometimes it can be because there's actually already a potential injury in your hip. Maybe there's something going on at the hip joint, someone's in pain, and that's causing some their glutes to not work as well as it should. So these other muscles are kicking in to try to help. Sometimes it's just the product of we sit on our asses way too much all day between, driving in our car, sitting at our desk, sitting at the dinner table. So that leads to the butt not working quite so much. And when you're sitting with your hamstrings in a shortened position. So that makes them want to kick in and fire. So it's just and part of the reason we do that exercise is to help people reprogram that. And that's something where I do some single leg bridging before almost every single run of mine, just because I know inevitably with today's society that, all of us sit more than we should. So I think it's just a good reminder to my brain, to my body, that I need to use, my butt to extend my hip, and that's going to make for a more efficient running pattern. And it's going to, potentially stave off some pains in my hips, my knees, my back, somewhere along those lines. Great question, David.
Great answer.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Feel free to jump in or type either way. Cool. So Jenna she just posted our link to the blog post on our website that has that checklist, so you guys can reference it anytime you want. It's got videos of each of the tests, as well as that chart that we were talking about on there for the heel raises to, so let you guys check to see how many you should be able to do just to be at the bare minimum for your age. So check that out, guys. And if you have any other questions, though, please let us know.
Hi, this is Leslie. Can you hear me?
Hey, Leslie. Yes.
Hi, I have a couple questions. Going back to foam rolling, just curious. You showed the long, smooth foam roller, and you spoke about lacrosse balls. But what is your thought on? There's the foam rollers with like the little nubs and the little balls with the nubs. Do you prefer one or the other, or is one for one thing and the smooth is for another?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is preference. You know, I actually don't really use the smooth one a ton. I kind of like these little trigger point ones.
Mm,
You know, I actually think I like the trigger point one more though, not necessarily because of the little nubs on there, but more because it has a little bit of give first and then it's very firm after that, which I find
mm,
cool for kind of getting that kind of tack and floss component down. Um, some people love the rumble rollers. I don't know if they're really necessary. Those are the ones with kind of really the big knobs on them. Uh,
yeah.
you know, you can really get the job done with almost any roller. I think it's just more of, individual preference for people. Um, I do think ones that are too soft don't really do a whole lot for you. But once in a while, people need that just to introduce themselves into foam rolling. Um, but I do think, these ones work great. These are Trigger Point is the brand. But, if you're getting one of like the smooth ones, make sure you get like the black dense foam, not like the white soft ones, because the white soft ones probably do nothing and you're going to actually deform it probably within 2 weeks of using it. Whereas these ones are at least pretty firm, and these can work too. Yeah, I just find this one to be a little bit better and a little bit more convenient because of the size. So it's very, mobile. You can bring it with you a lot of different places. But yeah, I think anyone can do the job. A lot of people just have different preferences. They even have like the expensive Hyper Ice ones that will like, vibrate as you're using them. Those again can sometimes be helpful. That extra vibration can help at times for kind of, calming some of those muscles down. But I think for most people, it's probably not worth the extra cost of it. I mean, we have them in the clinic here, and I still tend to use this more than the vibrating ones. So.
Okay, thanks. Good. I have actually those exact two foam rollers that you have. So I guess it's good.
Yeah,
Um,
you can't go wrong with this one, that's for sure.
okay, I have the long one too. I like to lay on it. So,
Yeah, so that's actually probably why we have that here, and we'll use it
uh,
just for doing like lengthwise one, just because it's longer and easier to, get your spine on.
right. Okay, and my second question is, how about as far as um, loosening the psoas muscle in the front? Because you're talking about sitting a lot, and I
Yeah.
find I get really, well, I sit a lot, so I'm pretty tight in that way. Any specifics that are good for loosening that? I know there's like lunge stretch.
Yeah, so I mean a couple of things, but with regards to like any soft tissue work, like we talked about with the foam roller, that's a hard one to get to. But there is a product
Right.
called the Right that some people swear by these days, which is a pretty cool product and does a good job of getting in there. If you have if you have more of a chronically tight psoas. What I would say is I'll give you a little quick tutorial on how to properly stretch the psoas, because it is something that kind of gets bastardized a lot by when I see people stretching it.
Yeah.
But actually, in strengthening the psoas is actually something where people don't do much of, but they probably should do more of. There's a little bit of a key, as if you've heard me mention a few times, that most of us spend too much time stretching and not enough time strengthening.
Mm-hmm.
But to properly stretch your psoas, everyone always goes into this big long lunge stretch here. The issue
Right.
here is they end up going into an anterior pelvic tilt. So meaning kind of like dumping the water out the front of your pelvis in the kind of an arch back position. So you may feel stretching here, but you're not stretching the tissues that you think of just based off the anatomy of the psoas. So your psoas comes up and attaches to your lumbar spine. So if I'm going into lumbar extension and anterior pelvic tilt, my lumbar spine is actually moving forward. So I'm basically, as I lengthen through here, I'm also shortening at the top. So it doesn't create the stretch of your psoas. You'll feel it in the front, but what you're actually doing is just pressing your hip forward against the capsule. So the best way to stretch it is just get into a neutral kneeling position first. Now what I want to do is engage my core and create a posterior pelvic tilt. So what I mean by that, so if my hands are my pelvis, This would be an anterior pelvic tilt. This is a posterior. So think of kind of leveling that pelvis out. So like if your pelvis is a bucket of water, you don't want to dump any water out the front, okay? So you're going to first create that posterior pelvic tilt. You'll feel a stretch in your psoas already if you just do that properly. You'll squeeze your glute on that downside. Now I'll feel a little bit more of a stretch. Now I'm going to only slightly move forward because I don't want my pelvis or my spine to go into any more of a forward pelvis tilt or an arch in the lower back. And if you do that appropriately, you'll feel a stretch in that front of the hip there without doing any of the kind of way out here that I see people doing. Which, like I said, doing that, you can actually damage your hip. So start here, squeeze your butt, posterior pelvic tilt, slight lunge forward, and that's it. Now, if you want to, you can add in different angles. You can reach your arm overhead. You can kind of give a little bit of rotation up top, some things like that. But yeah, so don't get into that really, really deep lunge. You could actually kind of cause more instability in the front of your hip.
Thank you for speaking to that. I've seen that before too, and I could feel the stretch when I'm on this. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that was right. But as you were mentioning, as far as strengthening, then
Oh yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff you can do there. I'll give you one quick one with a band. So it's kind of like many of you might have seen like a dying bug exercise before. But basically that band is going to go around my feet. And you're on your back here. So it's kind of like a dying bug, but just difference in the focus of being on the psoas. So I'm just going to extend one leg out. And really I'm working my hip flexor on this side, so I'm trying to keep that stable here and then back. So I call this a psoas march. Bands are a great way to strengthen there. You can even then put that into a standing position where you go up against a wall and you're marching here and back down. And that's going to work your glute on the opposite side. So sorry, on my stance leg, my butt's going to be firing to stay in the hip extension. And then my psoas is going to be working on this side. So that then becomes a little bit more running specific. I usually have people start with that psoas march on the ground just because most people have not done much psoas strengthening before. So I usually start with a little bit more basic, more isolated exercise, and then incorporate that into a more running specific. So where you do that kind of, call it the triple flexion exercise, and do it kind of leaning against the wall there. So then it becomes very running specific. And then, then you can take a lot of different drills that I'm sure David has done with you guys with some of the track nights with like your high knees, your A skips, your things like that, which then start using that psoas muscle in your running pattern.
right. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's nice to, in a sense, you're doing two things at one time, strengthening two things at one time. So you're creating balance. I'm guessing that's what you're getting at, right?
All about efficiency here.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for the question, Leslie.
And there was another question, kind of when you're just starting out with these, how often would you recommend these exercises? So maybe the skills checklist, checking all the checklists, and then maybe the strengthening exercises?
Yeah, so most of these exercises that we did are not high load exercises. So it's not like doing a heavy squat, a heavy deadlift, things like that, where maybe you should only do a couple times a week of it. These exercises are a little bit more motor control based. So you can really do those every day, or at the very least you can do some every other day, but none of these exercises are going to leave you in a state of where, you're getting a lot of the delayed onset muscle soreness. That doesn't mean you have to do all of those every day. Everyone has different time constraints on it. But if you pick a couple of them to do and spend, 5 to 10 minutes before your run and work on those, and it can kind of help to prime those muscles for your run, and then also be strengthening that for preventing future issues.
Awesome. And then going back to the march you just did.
Yeah.
If I'm getting fatigued doing that, is that a weakness in my psoas, or is it coming from my glutes or elsewhere?
So if you're talking about the one where you're laying on your back, that's definitely probably a little bit more psoas that's fatiguing. You know, a lot of people, so I was using a blue band here. That's a pretty strong band for that. So, you know, starting with one of the lower levels, so that this is the Perform Better. So like blue is like their second strongest one, whereas like yellow is the lighter side of it. So you might want to start with a lighter band there. And if you're getting fatigued more with that standing march with it, that can be any number of things. You know, that can be a little bit of glue, it can be a little bit of core, can be a little bit of balance. So that's why I suggest starting with that that psoas march with laying on your back, because that then allows you to kind of isolate it. And then when you start to feel that being a little bit more even side to side, then you can kind of go up into the more dynamic positions.
Awesome. Thank you. So I know we're getting kind of close to an hour here. I'm going to go ahead and drop some contact information into the chat box so you guys can all reach out to us if you have any other questions. I'm also going to include a kind of a feedback form. It helps us, you know, determine what kind of exercises and things to have for maybe our next session. We'd love to see you all again. But if there's any last questions, please feel free to either speak up or send them in the chat while I get you guys the contact info.
And, you know, while we're waiting for another question or whatever, let me invite everyone on this same Zoom channel tomorrow night at 6:30, not 6 o'clock when we started tonight, but 6:30 tomorrow night. We are doing a track workout, a virtual track workout. And if you have earbuds or headphones or something, or just crank up your cell phone, you'll be able to hear the coach, me tomorrow night, walking you through a regular track workout. And so there you go. And thanks everybody for coming tonight. This has been great. I know personally, I got a lot of work to do. So good job.
Hey, well, we all do, David. I think that's why we love running, because we can always keep improving.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? I learned that my left glute is weaker than my right glute. Not that everyone needed to know that, but I did not know that in all these years.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you guys for all coming out. We really appreciate it. It was great again to chat with you. And if you guys have any questions down the road, you know, Jenna put that contact info there. Don't hesitate to reach out, and you know, look forward to doing some more of this with you guys in the future. And then go enjoy track night tomorrow and the Lakers game tonight.
Well, I'm going to stop the recording. I will stay on a little longer for anyone who has questions or for you guys. And thanks you guys so much. If you want to unmute yourself and applaud, this would be the time to do it. Thank you very much, everybody. And for Devin and Jenna, from you guys, from Evolution Physical Therapy, you especially, thank you very much.
Hey,
And
you know, applaud to all of you guys for putting the time to come on here and learn and work on improving. So good job, guys.